This is Chris from needlepointers.com, and today I'm going to show you how to assemble this 20-sided dice foundation paper pieced block. I designed this pattern in Electric Quilt 8 and have put together the printable PDF pattern and PDF instructions for this D20 block. The PDF will be available on our website page for this tutorial. Look in the description of this video for a link to the photo tutorial, supplies, and pattern. In this video, I will show you the basics of paper piecing and give some tips on assembling this specific dice block. My kids are into role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons, and I wanted to make some placemats for my college student. She can use the placemats while playing D&D or just use them in the kitchen. They feature the D20 dice block in the center and Dungeons & Dragons themed fabrics. Later, I plan to release a tutorial on how to make placemats like these. These placemats are good for featuring a block or fabric in the center since it has an 8-inch center block. Be sure to subscribe to our channel or our newsletter so you will be informed when we release the placemat tutorial. What you need to make this block: the instructions, the pattern printed at 100% or actual size, foundation paper piecing paper, an add-a-quarter ruler, 4 shades of fabric for the dice and 1 background fabric, neutral thread, white, cream, or black if using dark fabrics, sewing machine, scissors, rotary cutter and mat, and a small iron. When you get the pattern and instructions, please review for tips on fabric colors, the order of assembly, and tips for assembling the block. This page of the instructions shows the block diagram. Please note that I selected the crazy colors shown in the block to help you in assembling the block. When the pattern is printed, EQ8 lightens the colors. When I tried to use all gray and black for the colors, I couldn't tell the difference when I had the pattern pieces cut apart. These crazy colors will help you piece the block correctly. When selecting the fabrics for this dice block, start with a very light color in the center. Then pick a light, medium, and dark fabric. You will also need another fabric for your background fabric. In the diagram and on the printed pieces, the colors are: yellow is the very light, green is the light, red is medium, gray or black is dark, and the blue or purple is the background color. The printed pattern has 2 pages and 3 sections. Each section is numbered, and you will always start with the number 1 section and work your way through the numbers, adding each fabric in the color as indicated by the printout. After all 3 sections are sewn, then the sections are sewn together by sewing the B to the C block and then the BC block to the A block. When you print the pattern pieces, select 100% or actual size. Measure this side of the A piece and make sure that it measures 8.5 inches long. If it doesn't measure 8.5 inches, the block will not finish at 8.5 inch square. If it doesn't measure 8.5, please check your print settings and make sure you're picking actual size or 100%. The finished block will be 8 inches finished size once it's sewn into the quilt. So it's 8.5 inches here, and once I sew it into a quilt or a project, it will be an 8-inch finished block. I recommend printing the pattern on lightweight paper. This makes it easier to remove the paper once the block is complete. I like to use this papers for foundation piecing when working with paper piecing patterns. So let's get started assembling this block. The first step is to cut apart the 3 sections of the pattern and trim away the extra paper. On the pattern, the dark lines are the sewing lines. These dotted lines around the outside of the pieces are the cutting lines, including the 1/4 inch seam allowance. As you can see, each pattern piece is numbered and colored to make it easy for assembly. I will show you how to piece section C. C1 is in the background color, so I will start with that piece. We have another tutorial on paper piecing available in the description of this video. If you need more information on paper piecing than I am giving, please watch that video. All of the pieces around the edges need to extend past the dotted line. I have cut a piece of the background fabric for piece C1 that is larger than the whole area of C1. You need to make sure that it's extending at least 1/4 inch past all sides. So I'll place it on there like that, and the piece is extending past the dotted lines and past this point. It's coming way down to here. So it doesn't matter if it's too big because we will trim it later. Place the first piece of fabric behind the pattern with the right side facing downward or away from the paper. Center the pattern piece on the fabric. Make sure that the fabric extends past all sides of the C1 and including the seam allowance if there is one attached to the piece. You may need to hold it up to the light to make sure it's in the correct position. Don't worry if the fabric is larger because we're going to be trimming it as we sew the other pieces on. Place a pin to hold the fabric in place. We only use a pin for the first piece. I'm using this add a quarter ruler. This is the best ruler for paper piecing. I wouldn't want a paper piece without it. It looks like a normal ruler from the top, but notice on the back it has a lip. This is 1/4 inch from the edge, and it makes it very easy to trim the seams on paper piece blocks. Lay the pattern piece on a work surface. Next, we will sew fabric C2 to C1. Place your add a quarter ruler on the line between C1 and C2. So it's this line. Fold the pattern paper on the line using the ruler to make a nice crease. Put the add a quarter ruler with the lip over the edge and along the crease or the fold. The lip on the ruler will hook onto the paper and hold it in place. Trim the excess fabric from your previous piece or pieces to 1/4 inch seam allowance. So there you see we have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Rough cut a piece of fabric big enough to cover the C2 section. When you have angles, you may need to make your fabric a lot bigger than you think because the fabric, when it folds up, may go on an angle, and then you'll need to either adjust it or cut a larger piece. Once you have your fabric piece, align the edge along the edge that you just trimmed. Fold the fabric back and check to make sure you're going to be covering the entire section of the piece you're sewing. Thread your sewing machine with a neutral colored thread. If you're using a lot of dark colors in your block, then you might want to use like a black or gray thread. I usually use a white or a cream thread. Set your machine on straight stitch. If you're piecing small, tiny pieces, you'll want to shorten your stitch length to make sure that you get a few stitches on every piece. For this pattern, the pieces are large enough so I can leave my machine at the standard stitch length. Take the pattern with the 2 pieces of fabric and flip it over, holding the fabrics in place. Sew with a straight seam on the line between C1 and C2. Start your stitching a few stitches past the end of the line. When the piece is adjacent to the seam allowance, stitch all the way through the seam allowance and a couple stitches past the dotted line. So I'm going to start just a bit beyond the line, and you don't have to back tack on this because the lines will cross each other. The lines of stitching will cross each other, and which will keep them from unraveling. Remove the pin and then iron open the seam. When I'm paper piecing, I like to keep a small iron and an ironing mat next to my machine so that I can quickly sew and iron and then continue to the next piece. I love this little also iron. Its size is ideal for using for paper piecing, and a small ironing mat or table. As long as your C2 fabric is extending across all of the areas of the C2 piece continue to the next piece. I will continue piecing with C3, C4, C5, and C6 in the same way. Lay your pattern down on the table and place your ruler on the line between C2 and C3. Crease it on the line, fold the paper back, and cut the 1/4 inch seam allowance with your rotary cutter. Cut a piece of fabric in the C3 color larger than the C3 area on the pattern. This piece is more angled than the last one, so you will need a larger piece of fabric. Place the fabric with right sides together along the trimmed edge. And I can see through the pattern, and I can see the line is there and there, so I know that my fabric is extending past both ways that way. And if I fold it up, it extends way past the end of the pattern, so I know it will cover the whole area. Holding the fabrics in place, flip it over so the pattern side is facing up, and I'm going to sew from just beyond the line and down the line between the C2 and C3, and I'm going to end past the dotted line. Iron the seam open and then check to make sure that the piece covers the section entirely. I will continue with C4, C5, and C6 in the same way. I will let the video run, but fast forward it so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, I'm finished piecing this section. You can see the fabric extends past the seam allowance and the dotted line around the whole piece. The next step is to trim the fabric along the dotted lines. You can use any ruler to do this. I tend to use my 1/4 ruler because that's the ruler I have sitting here. If you wanted to leave extra fabric around the block, then you would leave extra fabric along the sides that have the background fabric. This first section is complete. The other 2 sections of the block are pieced in the same way. Start by pinning fabric for section 1 to the back of the block with the right side of the fabric facing away from the paper. Fold the paper on the line, trim the fabric, and then sew along the line. Continue the process for these other 2 sections, and I'll be back after I finish piecing the other sections. Here I've completed piecing the 3 sections for this block and trimmed them all along the dotted line. That was the front, and here's the side with the paper side facing up. Next, we're going to sew these 3 sections together by sewing the B and the C blocks together first. When sewing these together, I'm more concerned with the points and these lines matching up more than the edges of my blocks. So when I put them together, I want to pay more attention to the fact that this seam matches up here and this will match up there than the ends. So to do this, put the 2 pieces together and kind of fold back the seam allowance so you can check and make sure that it looks like your points and your seams are going to line up. And then pin this together, and usually I'll put the pin through and check on the other side to make sure that the pin is coming through on the line. Like I'll pin it right on the line and then make sure that the other side is lined up the same. And then I'll pin here right on the line in the intersection, and I can check it here to make sure that it's coming through in the same place. And then sew the BC together along the solid line. Okay, so I have my pin sections, and this is a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but you want to pay attention more to sewing along the lines than your 1/4 inch foot. So then I can open this up and check, and it looks like I did a good job at getting my seams lined up there, or my points all lined up there, and my seam lined up there. If they didn't match up correctly, or you don't like how they match up, you can take the seam out and re-sew it again. Next, remove the paper from the seam allowance. I like to do that because it reduces the bulk in the seam allowance. Then I'm going to iron the seam open, and those two pieces are together. I also finished sewing the A piece onto the BC piece using the same technique to match the seams up. I removed the paper from the selvages and pressed the seam open. So the block is now complete and ready to be sewn into the quilt top. As a final tip, when paper piecing, it's recommended to leave the paper on the back until you get the block sewn into the final project. Remove the paper once the quilt top is complete before you layer the quilt together. The foundation paper will tear easily along the sewn lines. If you have a lot of paper to remove, you can work on it while you're watching television. I hope you enjoyed learning how to sew this 20-sided dice paper piecing pattern. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Like and share our videos, and if you're not a subscriber, subscribe to our channel so you won't miss future videos. Visit our website, needlepointers.com, for lots of other quilting tutorials and free projects. While you're there, sign up for our free weekly newsletter so you won't miss new tutorials. Happy quilting!